texts that priests buried rather than let circulate, texts that temple archivists locked inside sealed storerooms and listed under no catalogue, texts that scribes copied only after performing protective rituals, signing nothing with their own names. These are the oldest forbidden documents in human history. We call them cuneiform incantation tablets. And here is the part that almost nobody seems to want to discuss honestly. These were not superstition. They were a medical system, a precise, obsessive, institutionally enforced medical system. Remember that, because everything in this video depends on it. The names you must never pronounce, the sigils you must never trace, the pacts you must never sign. Welcome. Tonight, we open 4 of these tablets. From each one, a single entity, the demon its own scribes warned should never be named without ritual protection. 4 names, 4 chapters, 4 case studies in a system that ran, without interruption, for more than 2,000 years. What follows is esoteric tradition and religious folklore. Read closely. I am not making metaphysical claims, but the same warnings surface, century after century, inscribed on clay tablets that never met each other, copied by scribes in cities separated by hundreds of miles, and some patterns persist for reasons we do not entirely understand. That matters now because these tablets still exist. The British Museum holds thousands of them, the Louvre holds more, and certain cuneiform series, the ones dealing directly with named demonic entities, still require specialist credentials and formal institutional access to consult in full. Not because the museums believe in demons, because the tablets are fragile, rare, and the knowledge encoded in them is still being actively translated by scholars who treat each line with forensic care. 2,000 years of continuous demonological literature, and we are still reading it, still finding things we missed. If the darker corners of esoteric history fascinate you, subscribe. Every week we read what was never meant to be read. Now, let us go back to the beginning. If you walk into the British Museum today and navigate to room 55, you will find yourself standing in front of one of the largest collections of cuneiform tablets on Earth. Among them, catalogued under museum reference numbers that most visitors walk past without a second glance, are amulets and incantation texts dating to the 1st millennium BCE. Some of them name her directly, most of them do not. Most of them encode her presence through circumlocution, through symbol, through a set of 7 names arranged in a specific sequence, because the tradition held that speaking any one of her names, without the full protective formula, was an invitation, not a metaphor, an invitation. The tradition tells us she was a daughter of the sky god Anu, cast out for reasons the texts leave deliberately vague. She descended. That is the word the tablets use, consistently. She descended to the earth, and she moved toward the places where new life was most concentrated: nurseries, birthing rooms, the spaces around pregnant women. The legend continues that she carried 7 names, each one a different face of the same destruction, and that she could be neither killed nor permanently expelled, only redirected, only bargained with, only, under very specific ritual conditions, temporarily bound. Here is the line that has unsettled scholars of Assyriology for over a century. From a 1st millennium protective incantation series, translated by the British Museum's own cuneiform collection team, the phrase reads, "She who erases." Read that again. She who erases. Not she who kills, not she who harms, she who erases. The scribes who encoded this were making a very specific claim about the nature of the threat. Killing leaves a body, killing leaves evidence, erasing leaves nothing. No child, no memory of a child, no trace that the child was ever there. Notice what that framing does not say. It does not describe an attack, it describes an absence. The violence is in the negative space, not the wound, the void. Her name, in the original Sumerian, is Delamashtu. The superscript D marks it as a divine determinative, the scribal convention for indicating that what follows is a name belonging to the category of gods or god-adjacent beings. Lamashtu itself is typically translated as she who erases, or in some scholarly readings, she who strikes down, a name that is itself a diagnostic, a name that tells you exactly what the entity does before you have asked a single question about it. Now, there is no supernatural explanation required for what these tablets were actually documenting. Let me be precise about that. Infant mortality in 1st millennium Mesopotamia was catastrophic by any modern standard. Scholars estimate that somewhere between 30 and 40% of children born in this period did not survive their first year. Infections, complications at birth, fevers with no understood cause. The deaths were real, they were frequent, and they arrived without warning. Lamashtu was not the cause of those deaths. She was the explanatory framework built around them. A culture processing unbearable loss through the only cognitive tools available to it. But what fascinates me about the legend is its internal logic. The scribes did not make Lamashtu arbitrary. They made her precise. 7 names, each one mapped to a specific type of harm. Protective amulets with specific iconographic requirements. Her image cast in clay or metal, facing outward, positioned to intercept rather than to be hidden from. The system was not designed to comfort the grieving. It was designed to give the living something to do. A protocol, a procedure, a set of steps that, if followed correctly, constituted a rational response to an irrational threat. That is not superstition. That is medicine, operating at the edge of what the available knowledge could support. And she was not the only one. Because moving through the same texts, appearing in the same incantation series, carried on the same wind that Lamashtu herself was said to ride, there was something else. Something the scribes treated not as a threat to be expelled, but as a weapon to be aimed. Something the scribes treated not as a threat to be expelled, but as a weapon to be aimed. If you walk into the Department of Near Eastern Antiquities at the Louvre in Paris and find your way to case AO 22205, you will be standing in front of a bronze head roughly the size of a human fist. It was cast sometime in the Neo-Assyrian period, around the 8th or 7th century BCE. The head belongs to Pazuzu, and the curators will tell you, if you ask, that it was not placed in a home to invite him in. It was placed there to keep everything else out. The legend, as the texts preserve it, is precise about what Pazuzu is. He is described in the incantation series as the king of the evil wind demons, the son of Hanpa, lord of the underworld winds. The tradition tells us he commands 4 winds simultaneously, the north, the south, the east, and the west, and that his face alone, depicted correctly, was enough to drive Lamashtu back from the threshold of a home. Supposedly, pregnant women wore amulets carved with his likeness, not in worship, but in the same spirit you might keep a guard dog. You are not devoted to the dog, you just know what it frightens. But here is the line from the incantation series that stops scholars cold every time they read it in full context. I am Pazuzu, son of Hanpa, king of the evil wind demons. I ascended the mighty mountains that quaked, and the winds that I raised rushed violently together, bringing gloom and darkness. Read that again. He does not say he was sent. He does not say he was summoned. He says he ascended. He says the winds rushed together because he raised them. Notice what that does not say. It does not say he is controlled by any god, any priest, or any ritual. The text presents him speaking in the first person, announcing himself, describing his own power without qualification. Not a weapon handed to you, not a symbol of protection. A thing that has decided, for reasons the text does not explain, to be useful. Let that sit for a moment. The etymology sharpens the discomfort. Pazuzu, in Akkadian, most likely derives from a root connected to the locust wind, the hot, dry, pestilential blast that comes out of the desert and destroys crops, spreads disease, and suffocates whatever it touches. A name that is itself a weather report for the worst possible day. Now here is the skeptic's honest correction. There is no evidence, anywhere in the archaeological record, that Pazuzu received cult worship in the way that Marduk or Ishtar did. No temple, no priesthood, no sacrificial calendar. Scholars, including Alastair Livingstone, writing in the 1980s on Assyrian court poetry and ritual, note that Pazuzu exists entirely within the apotropaic tradition, the tradition of using one dangerous thing to repel another. The head in the Louvre is not a devotional object, it is closer to a lock. But what fascinates me about that distinction is how thin it actually is. You are still bringing him into the house. You are still carving his face. You are still, in some functional sense, in a relationship with something the scribes considered genuinely dangerous. Fear, dressed up as protection, is still fear. And if Pazuzu was the wind that moved above the earth, there were forces that moved below it, 7 of them, to be precise. And they did not come for you alone, they came in formation. Now we need to travel backward even further, past the Assyrians, past the Babylonians, all the way to the late 3rd millennium BCE and the Sumerian city-states of the southern Tigris-Euphrates plain. The texts that describe the Gala are among the oldest literary documents in human history. The most complete version of the descent of Inanna, the Sumerian myth in which the Gala appear in their most detailed form, survives across multiple tablets held in the collections of the University of Pennsylvania Museum, the British Museum, and the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin. Scholar Samuel Noah Kramer spent decades, from the 1930s through the 1960s, assembling the fragmentary pieces of this myth from those scattered holdings. What he reconstructed is one of the strangest stories ever written down. The legend, as the tradition preserves it, tells us that when the goddess Inanna descended into the underworld to confront her sister Ereshkigal, she was accompanied, or more precisely, followed, by 7 beings called the Gala. The tradition tells us these were not her servants. They were her escort, in the same way a bailiff escorts a prisoner to sentencing. At each of the 7 gates of the underworld, Inanna was stripped of one divine attribute, her crown, her lapis lazuli beads, her robe, and at each gate the Gala stood and enforced the rule. Supposedly, they felt nothing. They ate no food, they drank no water, they accepted no gifts. They could not be bribed, pleaded with, or reasoned with. They were, the text insists, simply the mechanism by which the underworld's law operated. And here is the line from the Descent of Inanna that scholars return to again and again, because it is so deliberately cold. The Gala who accompanied her were beings who know no food, who know no drink, who eat no flower offerings, who drink no libations of water, who accept no gifts of appeasement. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say they are cruel. It does not say they enjoy their work. It does not say they hate Inanna. It says they are beings who operate entirely outside the system of exchange that governs every other relationship in Mesopotamian religion. Every god, every demon, every spirit in this tradition can be appeased, fed, bribed, or negotiated with. Every single one, except these 7, not evil, just unreachable. That is the more terrifying idea. The etymology is precise and appropriately grim. Gala, in Sumerian, translates most directly as bailiff of the underworld. Not demon in the supernatural Hollywood sense. Bailiff, an officer of the court. Someone doing a job according to rules they did not write and cannot revoke. Now, the skeptic's correction. Modern Assyriologists, including Thorkild Jacobson, in his landmark 1976 study, The Treasures of Darkness, argue that the Gala are best understood as a legal metaphor, a mythological projection of the Sumerian judicial system onto the cosmological order. The underworld, in this reading, is not a place of punishment, it is a bureaucracy, and the Gala are its enforcement arm, no more supernatural than a summons. That reading is probably correct. But what fascinates me about the Gala is not whether they were real, it is what the Sumerians felt they needed to imagine. A force that cannot be appeased, that has no appetite for your offerings. That will come regardless. That image did not stay in Sumer. It migrated forward through every subsequent Mesopotamian tradition, into Babylonian demonology, into later Jewish angelology, into the structure of hell itself as Christianity inherited and formalized it. Some ideas, once imagined, refused to stay buried. And if the Gala were the problem, someone had to be the solution. Someone trained, credentialed, and equipped with 36 clay tablets worth of counter-invocation. Someone who stood between the ordinary person and everything we have been describing for the last 3 chapters. Step into the British Museum's cuneiform tablet collection, room 55, and you are standing in the same room as some of the tablets that belong to what scholars call the Udug-Hul series. The canonical version of this series, standardized during the 1st millennium BCE in the Neo-Babylonian and Neo-Assyrian periods, runs to 36 tablets. 36. The series was first systematically analyzed and translated in the 20th century, with foundational work done by Assyriologist Markham Geller, whose critical edition, published in 2016 through the State Archives of Assyria Studies Project, remains the essential scholarly reference. The tablets describe, in exhaustive and procedural detail, every category of evil spirit the Mesopotamian world recognized, and the precise countermeasures required to neutralize each one. The tradition tells us the series was not read privately, it was performed. Supposedly, the ritual specialist who wielded it was called the Ashipu, a priest-exorcist whose training, according to the texts themselves, involved mastering not just the incantations but the correct materials, the correct timing, the correct physical posture for each invocation. The legend continues that the Ashipu operated under the patronage of the god Asaluhi, later identified with Marduk, who was himself the divine archetype of the exorcist. Every ritual the Ashipu performed was understood, by the tradition, to be a repetition of something Marduk had already done at the beginning of time. The exorcist was not improvising. He was reenacting. But here is the line from Tablet 1 of the Udughul series that defines the entire project. The evil Udug, the evil Allah, the evil ghost, the evil Galu, the evil god, the evil Rabisu, they are the storm that knows no mercy. Read that again. The storm that knows no mercy. Not the demon that hates you, not the spirit that was sent to punish you. The storm, an atmospheric phenomenon. Something that does not choose its victims because it does not choose at all. It simply moves, and you are either in its path or you are not. Notice what that framing does. It removes moral meaning from the suffering. You are not sick because you sinned. You are sick because something passed through. And that distinction between punishment and contamination is one of the most sophisticated ideas in the entire history of medicine. The etymology roots the whole system. Udug, in Sumerian, originally meant attendant spirit, a personal supernatural companion, neither good nor evil by nature. By the first millennium BCE, the word had tilted entirely toward its dark valence. An attendant that had turned, a companion that had become a threat. The same word, two completely opposite meanings, separated by 1,000 years of cultural anxiety. Now the honest skeptic's correction. There is a strong argument among historians of medicine, made explicitly by scholar Joanne Scurlock in her 2014 work Sourcebook for Ancient Mesopotamian Medicine, that the Ashipu was not primarily a magician. He was a physician. His diagnostic categories mapped onto real disease presentations. His material interventions, plant-based, mineral-based, procedural, overlapped substantially with what we would recognize as empirical medicine. The supernatural framework was the explanatory system, not the treatment. But what fascinates me about that correction is what it implies about the Udughul series as a whole. 36 tablets of counter-demonic procedure, composed over centuries, refined by specialists, preserved in royal libraries, and underneath all of it, a genuine attempt to systematize the experience of human illness and suffering into something that could be faced, named, and answered. That is not superstition dressed up as medicine. That is medicine dressed up as the only language the culture had available. Every exorcism tradition that came after, Babylonian, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, inherited this architecture. The named enemy, the specialist with credentials. The ritual that reenacts a cosmic precedent. The text that must be spoken correctly or not at all. The system did not disappear, it evolved, and somewhere in what the clay preserved, it is still running. I need to pause here and be honest with you. The word count requirements, as specified, 7 to 10 words per section, are irreconcilable with the writing directions, which describe multi-beat philosophical closes and CTA paragraphs of 150 to 280 words and 20 to 45 words respectively. A 7 to 10 word section cannot contain a tricolon, a standing present, a pattern beat, a farewell, and a subscribe prompt. It is not possible to write those sections at that length without producing something that fails the content brief entirely.